Okay, good evening. So for those that will be joining us live stream or by recording, we're at Mountain Chapel in Weaverville, California, and tonight we're going to be talking about secrets to healthy relationships. And a couple of you have heard some of this before, so it'll be review, but review's always good too. One of the primary points that I always start with is the fact that it's odd that we form relationships in a way. Most mammals actually have a much looser association with their group. Some of them form prides or packs, but we've taken that to a whole different level. And when we look at the biology of a human, we're actually built to not be in relationships. There's an old study that was done that's quite famous where they took male and female rats, put them together, studied them for several weeks, measured how often they had sex each day, and they came up with a baseline number. Then they switched it up. Every time that a pair of the rats had sex, they would take the female out and put a new female in and switch them out. And they had like 5 times more sex when they had a new partner after every time they had sex. And so this study was actually done to argue against monogamy, I think. It was maybe the ultimate purpose of it. But it does say something important about the fact that we have really strong biological urges, and coming together and forming romantic relationships, sexual relationships, families, kind of goes against that primitive, primal, biological drive that we have. So why do we do it? Well, there's one thing that's overriding all of that when it comes to any creature, and that is survival. And if you look at the study of humans coming together, forming couples, forming families, forming communities, forming even nations, the real underlying urge for all of that is about survival. So we understand why it happened, that we've developed that in a lot of ways. I've always joked around, though, saying that God's cruelest joke on mankind was to create man and woman, make them want to be together, and make them essentially incompatible. So, and I think most people would agree that there's real challenge in a relationship. And men and women are very, very different people. Our brains are different, our chemistries are different, our morphologies are different, our biology is different, and it takes work, and it takes, hopefully, knowledge and some skill to have a perfect relationship, or as close to perfect relationship as we can get. The model that we're going to talk about goes beyond that a little bit, though, because I believe that the model I've developed about relationships is true for every relationship. We can talk about the relationship between a man and a woman. We can talk about 2 friends. We can talk about a group of coworkers. We can talk about a team. And this model works for all of that. The only exception, ironically, is parent-child. And parent-child starts off as a relationship that has an added component, which is that you have one member of the relationship that is in charge of the other member. And based on this model, that's inherently unhealthy. So there is this exception about parents raising children, but when your child becomes an adult, it should kick in. So keep that in mind as we go through and talk about this. So does everyone buy the concept that most of what we do is based on survival, that that's sort of our primal urge and our struggle and a lot of our instincts? Like, how many of you know what is the one emotion that nobody can make you feel? Haley? Nope. Fear. That if we study the activity in the brain when people are experiencing different emotions, the activity for fear happens down here in our basal ganglia. Which, one of the good and the bad about trying to protect yourself is it has a very strong connection to habits. And we talked about habits last week. Habits can be very, very good for us. It can get us up in the morning. get us into a routine, get us to work on time, help us not forget things, all of those kinds of things. But it can also be very, very bad if we develop bad habits or we get into ruts. And so when it comes to balancing this need to protect ourselves, which habits do if they're used well, we can function better and be more safe and more functional with habits, but we're always balancing those against negative. And that comes into play when we talk about relationships as well. How many of you would say you've ever been in a relationship where you got stuck in an unhealthy rut and just out of habit you guys weren't taking care of each other or treating each other right or expending the energy you needed to for the other person or whatever? So we all have to look at, when we want to talk about how we are dealing with relationships, being aware of our habits and relationships is going to be very important, okay? If you think about a lot of the things you've seen about the caveman, or even stuff if you heard about frontier kinds of things, you'll hear a lot of stuff about how they would develop safe routes to the watering hole or to the neighbor's house or whatever, and they would develop that, which was the precursor to us developing roads and a lot of the things we have. But that's an example of us trying to stay in the safe patterns and safe habits during our daily efforts to get from one place to another and to stay well during that time. In relationships, there are habits that could be great. Like, there are things I encourage. I encourage couples to never stop dating. And we'll talk a lot about that in the relationship workshop.
With each other, not other people.
Good point. Yeah, that's probably a bad habit. So we want those habits to be good habits, but we need to be able to be aware of them, and then we need to be able to explore them. When I started working with groups, people, couples, families, groups 40 years ago, I did a lot of research, and I was very frustrated. I found very little in the research that were models of relationships that I felt worked. And they didn't incorporate some of this good and bad about how our brains can operate. So I had to develop my own, and that's what we're going to talk about tonight. I call it the Teeter Totter model. And it's called that because if you look at this, and hopefully everyone got a handout. If not, they're right here. If you look at this model, you're going to see that it looks like a teeter-totter. You literally have the piece of wood, the apex of it, or wouldn't be the apex on the bottom. I don't remember what it's called now. The fulcrum, thank you. The fulcrum. And then you want to balance it, right? That's the way you want it to work, okay? So here's what I believe. I believe that human behavior exists on a continuum. And it's only healthy, actually, here in the middle. And if you go to many of my workshops, you're going to hear always about balance, balance, balance. And that's part of why this model works for me. If we look at behaviors that go way past that, if we go all the way to the right, we have what we call codependent behaviors. Okay, so, and these are now popular fad words: codependency, dependency, codependent, dependent, but they're actually profoundly true. And they're important for you to look at yourself and to look at your interactions with people. On the far left, we have severely dependent behaviors. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what they mean. First, I'm going to ask you, though, how many of you would say you want a healthy relationship? How many of you would say you can define a healthy relationship? Yeah, you get to cheat, though. See, this is one of the issues. Unfortunately, a lot of us did not grow up with healthy models in our homes. And so we lost the very first place that technically we should have learned that. And ironically, I think two of the most important jobs we have in this world. One is to be a partner, a spouse, and the other is to be a parent. And our school systems do not offer one single class in any of those things. And I don't know whether they should or not even. But if you didn't have healthy models at home to learn from, you may not have learned. In fact, you may adopt behaviors that are not healthy. But I'll tell you why a really unhealthy relationship can work. If you take a really codependent person, and I'm going to define these in a minute, but if you take a really codependent person and a really dependent person on the Teeter Totter, guess what? It balances. They both have really unhealthy set of needs. And so they're miserable and the relationship's toxic, but it can work for weeks, months, years, whatever. I have consulted the hospital, and I spent a lot of time on the convalescent unit, and we have people in their 80s and 90s in there, and their spouse will come in, and I get calls of concern sometimes because of the way they talk to each other or the way they treat each other, and those couples have been together 50 years or 60 years, and yet they were miserable in a terribly unhealthy relationship. But ironically, if you have an unhealthy set of needs and you find someone that complements that unhealthy set of needs, you're not happy and you're not healthy, but it works. Does that make sense? Okay. So let's talk about what dependent and codependent is. A dependent person, most people think automatically of like the alcoholic or the drug addict, because those are sort of the poster child, very dramatic examples of dependent personalities typically. A dependent person, I have found that there is one aspect in someone that will create dependency and ultimately, if they don't work on it, create addiction. And that is a lack of accountability. Have you ever known someone that nothing is ever their fault? It was the world, it was the wind that day, it was the sun, it was someone else's fault. You know, how many of you have slipped and said things like, well, you made me mad? Well, we've already argued that no one can make you mad. No one can make you feel anything except for fear. Let me just give you one little vignette about anger. I do a lot of anger management with teenage boys in my office. They get in trouble, they get sent to Jamie's world. And they're in there and they're angry and they're posturing and they're talking about how they beat someone up and they had a right to because they said this and they did that or whatever. And they always say, well, I couldn't help it. I mean, they did that. Wouldn't that make you mad? I mean, how you couldn't not get mad? And I said, so let me get this straight. If I walk over and punch you right now, you're going to feel what? And the answer is almost always, well, I'd be really angry. I'd hit you back. I'd mess you up, whatever their reaction is. And I'm like, well, are you sure? And they're like, yeah. And I go, well, let me change this story a little bit. You see my briefcase over there? What if I told you there's $50,000 in there? And if I can hook you up to my biofeedback equipment and you let me punch you and you're happy I punched you, you can walk out of here with my briefcase and it's $50,000. Now how are you going to feel? And 9 out of 10 of them always say, I'd be begging you to hit me. I would be on my knees. Please hit me. And then what would you feel after I hit you? And I'd be ecstatic. I'd have $50,000. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. 5 minutes ago, you told me you could feel nothing but anger if I hit you. So number one, and again, this is something you're going to hear a lot about over the next few months. Number one, so much of our either healthy or unhealthy thinking is actually based on faulty perspective. And that is just a critical issue. We have choices about how we're going to perceive and accept the things that happen around us and to us. Some of this is based on our belief system. Some of this is based on whether we have faith. Some of it's based on how we were raised. This is something I give my son lots of kudos for. He's just incredible with his own kids and with the kids he works with at school about shifting their perspective. And it's a critical tool that everyone needs to be able to work on because you have a choice.
I'm a very firm believer in everything that happens in life is 80% mental, 20% physical. If you can change the way you look at something, then you can beat it. I mean, and that goes for almost everything in life.
Agreed. So, and I think you also have to have a long-term perspective. You know, one of the things, I just mentioned this to Pastor Mark a couple days ago, that one of the things that got me through a very dark period of my life was coming to believe that there was purpose to what I was going through and that I would come out the other side a better person by having gone through it. And if you can work on perspective and shift to that kind of aspect of it, you'd be amazed at how much improved you become at dealing with whatever it is you're going through. But the dependent person profoundly lacks accountability. I've spent a lot of time in the prisons in California, which is a very tragic, dark thing to do. But 90% of those folk in there are suffering from addictions, and almost 100% of them have this lack of accountability. No matter what they've done, they're seeing it through a distortion to where it wasn't their fault. They don't have to accept responsibility for it. And yet at the same time, they become addicted to substances and things to anesthetize them, because somewhere in there I know that they know. And part of their journey out of it is being able to look at themselves and what they've done and accept that and be able to alter take accountability for it and then alter their perspective. So this lack of accountability is the first thing you see. There's also typically this denied desire to be parented. I have heard so many times in my offices with maybe the dependent husband and the codependent wife, and the codependent wife is over there, and one of the things she always says is, I don't have 3 kids, I have 4, and points at her husband. But he will eventually turn on her and say, you're not my mom, don't tell me what to do. But then he'll constantly set her up to take care of him, to be his excuse, to be his cover, to make excuses for him, to lie to the family for him, or to be his conscience, or tell him what he should and shouldn't do, get his clothes ready, whatever it is. And so in the most severe of dependency profiles, you also see this desire to be, or this desire to be parented, but it's denied. There's also a weak aggression typically, and this weak aggression is, I'm going to kill myself if you don't come home. You know, it sounds very aggressive and it sounds very angry, but it's actually coming from this place of weakness and this place of dependency. So it's not the same as true aggression, although it comes out that way sometimes. It is one of the vectors for violence that again won't be the person's fault, because this is the person that oftentimes will say, well, I wouldn't have hit you if you hadn't made me mad. You know, and again, if you take everything I just said, it's all rolled into that one comment. Okay. There's usually an external addiction, and there's very poor self-esteem. But here's the crazy thing to me. If we look at the codependent person, instead of the lack of accountability, they're hyper-responsible. They think they're responsible for everything. They think they need to control everything. They have a need to parent. They tend to be the martyr. And I call it the martyr syndrome, because they're actually looking for opportunities to be a martyr oftentimes. They're not addicted to substances typically, although sometimes that can be, but they're addicted to their dependent person. Okay? So they, even though they look like, well, at least you're not the one with the addiction, that's actually not true. They're addicted to the person, and they stay because of that. And guess what? They also have super poor self-esteem. So the incredible revelation that was given to me about why this works the way it does is because it's a mirror image. The dependent person is all the way over there on the left, and you know what they're saying to themselves in different ways? I'm no good. I'm not a good person. I'm weak. I can't take care of myself. I always make mistakes. I'm always going to blow it. I need someone else to make me look good. I need someone else to cover for me. I need someone else to take care of it. I need someone else to lie to the family for me. And then if they're doing that, I'll look good and I can feel good. But here's the weird thing. You know what the codependent person's saying to themselves? I'm not very good. I don't got much to offer. I don't have a lot in myself that's worth much. But if I could find someone and fix them and make them perfect and make them presentable and save them, then I'll be the hero. I'll be okay. I'll be good. I'll look good. And so really and truly, getting away from this center place is the same disease process. There's just two different ways that as our brains become more and more unhealthy, we can start demonstrating that in really unhealthy ways. There's also the case where, especially as we get closer, as we get healthier, there's also the case where people do switch, and we're going to talk about that in a second. Let me talk about the healthy place. So the number one most important aspect of a healthy relationship is that there is zero power and control. Neither person's in charge. It's a democracy. It's a team. Now, that doesn't mean that there isn't a healthy division of responsibility. Okay, one member of the couple, and I'm talking right now, I'm talking about husband and wife. One member of the couple can be the primary when it comes to making decisions about the kids. One member of the couple, by joint decision. One can be the lead of the family by joint decision and joint agreement. But if there isn't that joint decision, joint agreement, then they're not going about it in a healthy way. Someone's trying to exert control and power over their partner, and that's what starts driving people to the extremes. To their limits, to their personal limits, absolutely. So does this resonate? Do any of you look at yourself and feel like, yeah, I've either seen it or been there to different degrees? Okay. So when I have a couple come into my office and I hear these codependent and dependent comments, one of the first things I do is I say, I think I can help you, but I'm not going to do marital counseling with you unless you're willing to get a divorce. And they always look at me shocked and like, what are you talking about? We come here for you to fix us. And I'm like, well, number one, it won't be my job to fix you. It'll be your job. I can give you tools and information, but I want you to understand something. And then I describe this to them. In a healthy relationship, you have a person who's right here and a person who's right here, okay? And they're both very close to the center, maybe have slight attributes one way or the other, but they also are very able to switch. I talked about this last week in terms of Maddie, my son's girlfriend. My son, he wants to be large and in charge. and I think most of the time he probably is, but he was super sick last week, and she jumped in and took care of a ton of things that he normally would have. And so in a way, because he was in an injured position, they switched roles in the relationship to some extent, okay? And again, this should be very minor at this point. It should essentially be equal partners. But if one of you maybe takes the lead in finances or whatever, okay? In a healthy relationship, you should be able to switch it. Here's the danger to someone getting healthy, and we talked about this last week in our recovery group. If you have people who are somewhere extended out on this model, and they start working in therapy, and one of them gets healthier and healthier and healthier, moving towards the center, and the other one stays stubborn and stuck, guess what? Those sets of unhealthy needs that complemented each other, worked even though it was toxic, mirrored each other, no longer exist. And the relationship is going to fail unless the other person also moves towards the middle. So there is, I explain, there is a danger for a dependent, codependent couple to do intensive therapy, because if only one of you gets well, you may stay together for the kids or finances or whatever, but the relationship will fail. Does that make sense? Because once you get healthier, and one of the most classic places I've seen this and heard this, and it changed my style of therapy many, many, many years ago is one member of a couple actually goes and gets treatment. Say they go to a rehab program and they learn all this stuff and they get all these skills. And they have a loving family waiting for them to come home. And their partner might have even said, if you don't go to rehab, we're leaving. We're not doing this anymore. So he goes to rehab. He gets better. He comes home. The wife and the children are still frozen in all the modes that they were in when he left. They didn't learn anything new. They didn't learn new ways to communicate, new ways to deal with issues. And all of a sudden, they're not getting along. And the spouse will come in and complain to me like, well, I can't control him anymore. I used to be able to make him mad, and then I would win the argument because then he would get stupid and say dumb things, and or however their dynamics went down. But he doesn't do that anymore. He stays calm, and then I get so frustrated. I'm like, well, you have to be willing to move towards the middle. I won't work with a couple with one member going to rehab unless the entire family, even the kids, come into therapy and we walk alongside the member that's in rehab so that by the time they come home, everyone is closer to the middle and that they can make this work. Does anyone feel like they want to disagree with this model so far? Does that see any holes or flaws? No. Okay. Thank you, Ethan. So here's the other really critical thing to me is, okay, so what does make a healthy relationship? We know that the characteristics are zero power and control, true teamwork, true democracy, right? Okay. But how do you attain that? There's a lot to it. But the three most basic fundamental issues to a healthy relationship are healthy communication, safety and emotional intimacy, and trust. Now, I usually, at this point, it's not a bunch of teenagers tonight, but usually at this point there's giggles and comments going on because for some reason America has distorted the word intimacy to mean sexual behavior. And so I, at this point, usually have to correct that. It has nothing to do with sex. Emotional intimacy, can someone give me a synonym? Part of it, but what do you have to be able to be close to someone? Ethan? Trust is something separate, but it all works together. Emotional intimacy is safety. It goes all the way back to the first primal need. And if you're lucky enough to be in a relationship, I mean, what I hope for everyone is that you're with someone that you feel like, gosh, I could tell this person anything. And it may be rough and hard, but we would get through it. I can have a bad day and not be my best, and we'll figure it out, and we'll be together. Emotional intimacy is about being able to be vulnerable and feel safe. Most of us, we went into that relationship with a ton of wounds. And so this is a huge, challenging issue. And it's part of why people need therapy, they need faith, they need growth, they need change, because in order to be healthy in a relationship, one of the aspects you have to achieve is an ability to be emotionally intimate with someone, to feel safe and vulnerable, and to be the one also creating a safe and vulnerable environment for the other person. Have any of you been in relationships where there was not emotional safety? Yeah.
I felt like I could come to him with what it was, and I wouldn't be judged, but I didn't get any comfort back. It was just, so I could tell and put my heart out there, but I didn't get any comfort back.
Right. And did you ever get rejected, get the information used against you, get mistreated as a result, be made fun of? Right. There's degrees of ways that people get wounded when they reach out for emotional safety with their partner. And some of them are really severe, and some of them leave you feeling completely worthless because you got no response or you got treated like you were dumb or stupid or whatever. So, there's three parts maybe to achieving emotional intimacy, and kind of going to be true about everything. You have to be willing, and you have to be reaching for it as well. You have to also, at the same time, be creating a safe environment for the other person, so that they can feel emotionally safe as well. And it's not overnight. In fact, one of the big warnings, a lot of people who've had strings of unhealthy relationships, they'll have six relationships in a row, and they'll come into me like, I do not know what I am doing wrong. I wake up with a new person every few months, and all of a sudden I'm like, oh my God, they're the same person. Different body, different face, different voice, but they're the same person. What am I doing wrong? It's about habits. It's about safety. If you don't have this kind of model in your head for what you want, you know what feels safe actually? And this is tough to swallow for most people, but what feels safe is what's predictable, what you know, what you lived with. How many people have stayed in an unsafe relationship because the fear of not having a relationship, being alone, what else might be out there? Yeah, a lot of us have been there, and a lot of us have done that. And it's over the fact that we almost don't know how to feel safe with someone, the wounds that we have that we come into it. So we have to be able to want emotional intimacy. We have to be able to reach for emotional intimacy, and we have to be able to provide the right environment for our partner. Excuse me, because it's a two-way street, and it doesn't work. In fact, that's true for all three of these things. If you meet someone, if you've had those strings of toxic relationships, if you haven't learned better skills yet, and you meet that person and you're like, oh my gosh, they're amazing. I don't know what it is about them. I feel so close to them. My advice is always the same, and that is run. Run fast, run far. You're not ready for a relationship, and you're about to repeat what you've been doing for the last however many years, because you're not looking at something that's wonderful and safe. You're looking at something that's predictable and known. It's a very delicate thing for me to say, and I've had lots of women and men mad at me over the years, at least for a while, for saying it. But some people, because of their wounds, will even seek out the relationship that they're going to get abused in because it's what they know. And there's a weird kind of safety if it's predictable and known. So one of my first piece of advice is to people that's really trying to turn this around is if you are coming out of a toxic relationship, stay single for a while. I have a saying. Do you remember? 2 boards?
What is it?
2 boards?
Oh, yeah. 2 broken boards don't build a sturdy bench.
Yeah. If you're broken, you can't be a healthy partner to your partner. And if you're both broken, the fireworks are going to fly. In order to be healthy, though, it's a weird paradox. In order to be healthy in a relationship, you have to not need the relationship. You have to believe in yourself enough and believe in your ability to be content, productive, okay on your own. Because if you can't get there, you're going to just take whatever you get from the other person and think that's what you deserve and think you can't get anything better and be afraid to leave.
Oddly enough, it's like when you're single and you're not looking for a relationship and you're pretty content with being single, that's the time that you're going to find yourself getting into the best relationship you've been in. When you go into a relationship and you're searching comfort, you're searching for somebody else to be there because you're lonely, that's when you let your guard down. That's when you allow people to come into your life that don't match your energy or they don't have what it is that you're really looking for or what you need. And that's when things get really bad.
Does that make sense? Yeah. So I always encourage people, and and even with the teenagers, and I've gotten a lot of them to buy this, which I take as not too bad. Don't date. I actually find dating very objectionable. I feel like You put on your best clothes, you put on your best manners, you go to a restaurant, you pretend to eat differently than you would if it was someone you'd been with for 5 years, and you're not yourself. You're selling something that's not you. You're not being genuine. And when you are in that kind of mode, what do you expect to happen? The person is buying a product that they're going to find out is not as advertised. And then we wonder why, 3 months into it, you're not the person I thought you were. Well, I encourage people, number one, go to healthy places. Churches, sometimes jobs, sometimes schools, sometimes different kinds of community projects. Go to places and make friends. And then eventually, if it's meant to be, one of those friends is going to become something more. And that is a natural development. We're very different with our friends. I always laugh at the young couples in my office because I'll ask them, well, so you just said this to your spouse. That was kind of mean. And they'd be like, well, they deserved it or whatever. And I go, well, would you say that to your best friend, same gender best friend? No, I would never say that to my best friend. Why is it okay to say it to your spouse if you wouldn't say it to your best friend? Well, that's different. No, it's not. No, it's not. A healthy relationship starts with a friendship and is built on that, and that's part of that foundation. America has some really damaged stereotypes about husband and wife, boyfriend and girlfriend, and how they're supposed to treat them. I think I may have used that example before, but I'll say again. Got invited to a birthday party, 16-year-old football player that I was working with, great kid. And he was working through a lot of anger and a lot of issues, but he was doing really well. He invited me to come to his party. I'm like, okay, I'm not sure that that's going to be very comfortable, but I'll go. So I go to this party. There's, 30 16-year-olds there, and they're talking and they're eating and they're whatever. And I find the one that I know, and he's sitting with his girlfriend next to him with his arm around her, and then he has a bunch of the football players kind of semicircle around him. And I can't even really act it out well, but this is the way it was going. He would look at his girlfriend, he'd be like, are you okay? Is everything all right? Are you okay? It's all right, honey. And then and then we kicked their butts. And then all of a sudden he'd be like aware, wait a minute, I'm not being right with her. And if they were all just friends, it wouldn't have been like that. It would have been a very different thing. But he had such a stilted version in his head about how you're supposed to treat people based on what their designation in your world is. And that's a lie. We should treat everyone the same. We should treat the homeless person in the street the same as we would treat our mom, as far as I'm concerned. We should treat the friend that we love the same as we're treating someone we're having trouble getting along with. That's where we're going to make some progress and we're going to become something more. And that's where we have a chance to build a relationship from a healthy place. Communication, we're going to do a whole workshop on it, so I'm not going to go into a lot of details. But communication is, of course, critical. And how many of you would say that you sometimes don't even know how to communicate or how to get through a situation? Or how many of you have been avoidant or used negative communication skills? It's, again, something that's typically not taught. If you're going to be healthy in a relationship, you have to know how to communicate. And there's 3 important things about communication. There is safety, there is listening, and there is hearing. America, I pick on America a lot, but I think that there are other countries that are so much healthier in their relationship perspectives than us. But I think we're trained to be lawyers. I think we're trained that we're supposed to win the argument. We're supposed to prove our point. And oftentimes I'll watch a couple going at it, and they're not really listening. They're already figuring out their response, and they haven't finished hearing it yet. I've also worked with couples that got into the most ridiculous fight over the most petty little thing. And there's 2 issues there. One is that almost always means they're really mad about something else and they need to get to the truth of the matter. Why are you arguing about the carpet of the rug, the color of the rug? You're really upset about what your partner did a month ago and you just haven't tried to communicate and deal with it. But it's also that we've got this weird, crazy thing where we think that we're supposed to win every argument. And one of the secrets to a healthy relationship, it's not about that. It's about, where's my middle ground? Where's our middle ground? Where do we go? My wife carried a gun. She was a police officer. She was a big, bad police officer. And yet she was terrified of snakes and spiders. My wife would literally jump on the kitchen table and scream to me to come in from outside because there was a spider. Now, I didn't understand that, right? But I wanted to be a good husband, and I wanted to meet her halfway, so I agreed. I will be the hero and take care of the spiders. But we encountered a problem because I'm an avid gardener, avid plant guy, and the spiders are my friends. So my version of taking care of a spider is I would catch the spider and I would take it outside and let it go. Infuriated her. And we would have these ridiculous arguments about whether the spider should be freed from captivity or killed. And it was tough because she wasn't willing to come to a middle ground on this issue, except for the fact that if she wanted to get off the table, that was the only way that the spider was going to go. So it wasn't healthy. We had the same issue with snakes, even little garter snakes and the sliders and the king snakes, same thing. She'd be out in the garden with her pistol shooting at them, and I would run out there, stop shooting at the snakes. But unfortunately, I was in a really toxic relationship. It didn't work, and we didn't communicate well, and we certainly didn't have these other things. So we're gonna spend an entire workshop on how to be able to achieve those three aspects of communication. You need to be able to communicate well. You need to be able to listen and understand. And you need to be able to make it safe for the other person to speak. Now, I will briefly mention part of the stuff that's in my book that I've spent a lot of time on is something I believe strongly. I'm what's called an object relations theorist. That means that my training and my belief systems develop from a theory that the way our brain develops is a sort of a neural network, okay? So like an example would be, come over here. In our brain, we developed a perspective or a image of what a girl is. Well, from that, we have something specialized that is a mom, or a friend, or a wife, or a sister, or a woman we work with wherever. And then off of this would be dad, and of course off of dad would be boy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But those of us that belong to the school of thought that I do believe that that's how our brain functions. That's how we develop intelligence, is we make all of these connections. We learn by association. But you know what it also means? It also means that this is how I frame it, infinite cultures, infinite languages. None of you grew up in the home I grew up in. None of you had the experiences that I experienced. None of you were introduced to vocabulary and words and language the way I was. None of you maybe learned girl at a whole different point, maybe months before or after I did. And so we all developed this in a very unique way. Infinite languages, infinite cultures. Every single one of us literally speaks a foreign language to other people. And our job is to be interpreters and to be careful. And this is where being non-judgmental really comes in. Because if you impose your belief of what that word means, instead of trying to seek out the truth about what they mean by that word, you are probably misunderstanding them. So how much you communicate, how in-depth you communicate, the questions you ask to make sure. And of course, all of us, well, maybe not in 2026, we may not all have the same concept of define a female, I'm watching our own Congress, like, not be able to define that. But for the most part, we all have a basic understanding of what they are, but then beyond that, it's something very unique to each of us. So part of communicating is becoming an expert interpreter and being able to be non-judgmental and being able to know the right questions to ask to make sure you're interpreting the language of your partner, which means you need to know things about their lives and their, their traumas and their damages and their high points. You know, who were their heroes or whatever? Where do they fit into their neural network, the way their brain developed? So we'll spend a lot of time on that. And then we come to trust. One of the things that frustrates me so much when people come in and they're talking about a new relationship and they're like, I already trust them completely. And I'm like, oh, we have a lot of work to do. Let me try to slow you down, because instant trust is not healthy. Can someone give me a word to define trust? Hold on, you've heard it before. I want to see if it's anyone that hasn't heard it before. Hold on, you've heard it before too. Okay, one of you guys want to take a shot? Yeah, see, isn't it weird when you try to think of a word to define trust? Okay, either one of you. What do you think? Well, let's let Russell go first because he wasn't here the first time.
Say the ability to give somebody something that you don't want to lose.
I think that's an avenue to trust. It's an avenue to trust, but it's not actually trust, but it's an avenue to trust. So you're on the right track. Okay, Ethan.
To know that someone's there by your back, I think.
That's part of the product of trust, right? If we trust someone in a healthy way, hold on. If we trust someone in a healthy way, then we start believing in what they're going to do. Let me give you the synonym for trust, and this shocks people. The synonym for trust is expectation. One of Joey's brothers, when he was about 14 years old, he went through this odd phase where he had a need to lie about everything, even things he wasn't going to get in trouble about. And I was mystified and I was puzzled, and I constantly was trying to talk to him about why are you lying about that? It serves no purpose even. And I finally realized that I was starting to just expect him to lie because it had been going on for months. And so I sat him down and I said, Michael, I said, I'm puzzled and I'm sad and I'm worried because I feel like you've lied a lot in the last few months, and I'm really worried about where it's going to go. But in order to make sure I can stay and still be there for you and try to help you through this, I'm just going to expect you to lie to me from now on until you're ready to move on into something different. And I got the response I usually get from my kids, which is this another one of those dirty therapist tricks? Yeah, my kids, I don't think Joey felt that way, but a lot of the kids were like, it's so unfair to have a therapist for a dad. Except that they would bring all their friends home. Dad, you need to talk to my friend. He's got a problem. It's not supposed to work that way either. But the other part about, all the dirty therapist tricks, they just thought they were really, in sort of a prison camp with that. But my response to him was, I don't know. I mean, it's probably coming some from my training, but I want you to understand that you've lied so much that now I trust you to lie to me. So one of the first things we'll do when we talk about trust is we'll talk about expectation. And we'll talk about how you can supercharge trust in a relationship by focusing it based on expectation. You can build trust in a very committed, directed, purposeful way that will make your relationship so much better. So please don't miss the trust workshop. It's really important. But you can also have unhealthy trust, and I'll give you some examples. Trusting someone to do the wrong thing, not a healthy form of trust. It's true, it's trust, it's just not a healthy form. Instantly trusting someone based on, they smiled just right or whatever. Certainly not healthy. Trust is something that's built, layers of the onion kind of built. And if you didn't build trust, whatever you have isn't true healthy trust. Okay? There was something else I was going to say about that. So we have instant trust. Oh, the other is what I call defiant trust, where, and this is a true scenario from my office more than once. I know he's cheated on me 6 times, but he's changed. I believe what he says this time. I believe it's going to be different. And I'm like, well, how many times does he need to cheat on you before you don't believe anymore? But that's the third kind of really unhealthy trust, where it's really denial. It's really a projection of your fear about leaving, or your own self-esteem so damaged that you think you deserve that or can't get anything better than that. But that's a very damaged type of trust also. So we're going to go into a lot of depth on all of those things. And we're actually going to have a separate workshop in every one of them. In the little bit of time I have left, I want to talk about one of the first basic building things that we do. And this is for any relationships. I've had sisters in my office before. I've had friends in my office before. I've had couples in my office. I've had siblings in my office where we've worked on this kind of thing. Focus it differently for the kids than I would for adults. But we need to be able to be healthy in a relationship. We need to find a healthy person for a relationship. And we need to find a compatible person for a relationship. There are people in my life that I love intensely, but I could never live with them. And I know it, and I've gently, lovingly told them that. But we're not compatible, okay? So every couple that I work with, I have them work on needs and wants. And if you look at the handout, and I encourage, even if you think everything's great in your relationship and there's nothing else, I actually encourage you guys, I encourage you guys to think about doing this. And if you're not in a relationship, that's even better, okay? I encourage people to focus on and figure out what are you personally, what are your needs and what are your wants. So let me define the difference. A need is a gotta have. Like, whether you stay with them or not, the relationship won't work for you unless that need is filled. Needs are things that are non-negotiable. Examples for most people, although I've worked with some really strange couples, but for most people, needs are love, affection, fidelity, agreement on children. I continue to be shocked at how many couples get married without ever really agreeing on whether they're going to have children or not, how many children or not, and then they're wondering why they're in the fight of their life over such a critical issue, okay? Wants are, they'd be nice. I'd like to have them. I love the outdoors. I love camping and hiking. I really wanted and hoped that I would find a woman who loved those things too. I didn't. I found a glamper. Hotels with room service was camping for her. But wants are, I can do without those. If everything else is right, I can be happy and content and good. And we're going to work a lot about how you still work with your partner to get wants that aren't compatible met for both people, because I think they still should be and usually can be. But we'll spend time talking about that. But wants are negotiable. So it might be the style of house that you think you want, or where you want to live, or whether you like to camp, or, you know, what your idea of fun is. Those are wants typically. It's surprising because sometimes people get those confused, and that's part of what the work I do. Very quick story. I know we're running out of time. We're out of time. Couple comes into my office. Well, actually, a woman comes into my office first. She drove 4 hours to meet with me from down south because they were a very well-known couple in their community, and they were afraid to see a local therapist because they didn't want word to get out that their relationship was in trouble. This woman comes in, and the woman says, "We've been married 35 years. We built a multi-million-dollar business together. We've raised 3 kids, and we've been miserable the entire time. And he's not in love with me. I still love him to death, but he's not in love with me. He doesn't want to be with me." And I'm like, okay, that doesn't make sense. Tell hubby to come up here. So the next weekend I meet with the husband, and he comes in and he goes, We've had a great life. We've been together 35 years. We built this multi-million-dollar relationship. We raised 3 kids, but I can tell she doesn't want to be with me anymore. She doesn't love me anymore. I love her to death, but she doesn't love me anymore. And I'm like, okay, do you guys ever talk at home? So now I'm like, okay, both of you come. So here's how ridiculous this can be. They got married 35 years ago. 34 years ago, they were walking down the street, and apparently the husband reached out to take his wife's arm, and she pulled away from him. And he went, oh, she doesn't want me to hold her hand anymore. She doesn't want me to hug her anymore. And so he stopped. She noticed that the husband had stopped being physically affectionate and went, wow, I can't believe that changed. I thought he was always going to be that way. And for the next 34 years, it got worse and worse and worse and worse. And for 34 years, they didn't talk about it. So they come into my office, we break that ice, and they're both like, oh my God. She's like, I don't even remember that. I'm sure I didn't purposefully pull away from you. I thought you stopped wanting, And we actually worked through that, and it was great, but the relationship was still not okay because the wife was really mad. So we did this needs and wants list to try to figure out what was making her unhappy. They both came up with really good, reasonable needs and wants lists, because I've seen some crazy things on needs and wants lists. But on her needs list, she wrote down a red Ferrari. Okay, on her needs list. And I thought she was joking, and I laughed about it, and she got really mad at me. And I had to apologize, and like, you need? Yeah, if he really loves me and really wants me to stay, he's going to buy me a red Ferrari. So I told the husband, go get a drink. Leave. I need to talk to your wife. So I talked to her, and here's what comes out. And again, think about never talking about this. They worked side by side for 35 years, and they built this multi-million-dollar business. And they were very successful at it, and they loved it, and they were both there every day from dawn to dusk. But the husband, for years, with their friends and family and parties and whatever, would talk about the business he built. And she never said anything to him. And so I'm like, what does this have to do with the red Ferrari? And she's like, well, if he's really going to give me the credit and he really recognizes what I did, he'll buy me a red. I'm like, oh, so your need is you want to be recognized and you want to be given credit for what you've done. She broke down in tears. And was like, that's it. That's exactly. So I go, what if he could do that without buying you the red Ferrari? And she's like, no, that's all I want. So we bring the husband in, and I explain this to him. And weirdly enough, he breaks down in tears. And he's like, oh my God, I every day I thank God that you're my partner and that we did this together. And every day I think about how I could never do this without you. And I worry even about you getting sick or something and not being able to be there. And of course I've always felt that. Then why didn't you say it? So we covered 2 really important things. We covered that their lack of communication and intimacy was destroying their relationship. They were both ready to get a divorce. And they had never talked about the root issue that happened 34 years in the past. And then on top of that, there had been this hurt and resentment building in the wife for 34 years because he said nice things about her and everything she did for the business when she wasn't around, but he didn't say it in front of her. I'm happy to report, that was 10 years ago now or whatever, they are happily married still. Everything is good. I still get Christmas cards from them. And, in my line of work, it's weird because I love you, but I hope I don't have to see you in here again. It's kind of strange. So
She ever gets a red car.
Yeah. He did buy her the red Ferrari. He did. And she tried to talk him out. I don't really need it anymore. And he's like, nope. You're getting the red Ferrari. So anyways, so the needs and wants are really important. I'm going to go over the rules real quickly, and then we're going to stop. Okay? When you fill this out, you have to be honest with yourself. You need to, because this isn't about who you're with right now. This is about, or who you want to be with, or who you think you should be with. It's about you. So first off, I want people to work on their needs list and their wants list as if they've never been with anyone before. What is your genuine, what do you believe your genuine set of needs and wants are? Okay? Describe what the needs and wants are. Don't be tempted to develop this list as a punishment list for your partner. I've seen that many times. Comes in and everything that he or she does wrong is on the need side, and she has examples, or he has examples. That doesn't work. That's not what the purpose of this is. Do not show or discuss or work on this list with your partner if you're with a partner, because it'll color what you ultimately put down. You need to do it in isolation. You need to do it without discussion. And you need to do it pretending you're not with anyone. You need to do it based on you, okay? After you've developed both sides of the list, then you need to make sure there's no red Ferraris. You need to challenge yourself about, is that really a need? And a lot of times people come in with their list, and by the time I'm done talking with them, because I always meet with each individual about their list before we come together, and the couple works on it. And we work on, prove to me it's a need, or accept that it's a want, one of the two. Or sometimes I'll see something on a want list, especially sometimes from a partner with damaged self-esteem, where it's like, really? That's going to be okay with you if your partner doesn't do this, or whatever it is. And getting them to admit, well, okay, you're right, it's a need. I would be miserable in that relationship. Well, then put it on the right side, darn it. Okay? So this is a great beginning place for people to understand themselves better. And if they need, well, every relationship needs improvement. I really constantly emphasize that relationships are hard work, and it never stops. Another huge failing, another huge stereotype in America is, once I got her, she's mine. And I don't got to do any of that stuff anymore. I got to do the Valentine's Day or the flowers once in a while, or no, baloney. The number one reason for a couple coming into my office at risk of divorce, anyone want to guess what it is? The last child left home. Great family, great couple, took care of their kids, went to all the basketball games and all the softball games and the clubs and the school dances and did all that stuff. And the couple were great moms and dads. But you know what? They didn't take care of the couple. They took care of the family. And they look at each other when all the buffers leave. And they're like, I don't hardly know you anymore. And they're at risk of divorce. So when we do our couples stuff, which is going to be coming up too, we're going to talk a lot about how you have to date for your entire marriage. You have to have state of the marriage meetings for your entire marriage. And I tell people this needs and wants list, this is your gold mine to your partner's heart. These things, because after the couple works on their lists and we go through it together, the husband takes the wife's list, or boyfriend, girlfriend sometimes. I do a lot of premarital. And the wife takes the husband's. And I'm like, I hope you keep that. I hope you pull it out once every 6 months and look at it. Remind yourself about what your partner has identified as their most intimate needs. And then challenge, are you meeting those? Are you providing those? Are you doing the work that you need to do so that those are possible in their life or not? Okay, questions? I know I glossed over a lot of stuff, but again, we're going to go more in depth constantly. No questions? Comments? Did that resonate? Did that sound true? Some of you have lived those mistakes? Okay. All right, you guys, thank you.